Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name's Ivana Harenkiw if you're new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is Thursday, December the 16th. I had to look down at that one. The month is getting away from me here. And today we're going to talk about something that is happening in the city of Birmingham, but could affect people who statewide and also people even nationwide could be interested in what is happening here in Birmingham and an agreement that was recently extended in Birmingham. Before we get into the details here, I want to introduce my guest today. This is Rita Rodriguez. She is the Legal and Policy Director at Adelante, Alabama Worker Center, which is a nonprofit organization for low-wage immigrant workers and their families, and it is based here in Birmingham. So let's get a little bit up to speed on what's happening, Rita, and then we'll kind of talk about some of the ins and outs of this agreement, right? Earlier this month, the Birmingham City Council extended an agreement that they had already had for several years with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which we're going to continue calling ICE just for the sake of time and being a mouthful for this interview. So the City Council has extended this agreement. This is a 3-year agreement, and essentially what it does is it allows several Birmingham police officers to be cross-trained with ICE to be able to be essentially cooperating officers under ICE as well as Birmingham police officers. There are a lot of other details, I'm sure, and nuances of that agreement, but that's kind of an overview of what is happening here. Now, earlier this month, as I mentioned, the Birmingham City Council renewed that agreement. They say that there are 2 officers in the Birmingham Police Department who are cross-trained and who are also working as ICE agents. Now, there are some organizations, including Rita's organization, Adelante, that does not agree with this agreement with the city and ICE, that has some concerns about what is happening here and what could happen. So, Rita, I think the easiest way to do this and to break down some of the points of this agreement is to talk about the city and what the city council says the purpose here is, and then we'll talk about what your group says are your concerns. So I want to start first with kind of the overview of what the city says. And I've got some notes here to make sure I get this right. But the city says that they need help, they need access, and they need resources to get drug and sex traffickers off the street, to curb some of that crime, and also to deal with any type of capacity that foreign cartels could be operating in Birmingham. That is what they say they need, and that they do not have the resources. So they say that this agreement with ICE allows them to have some of those resources, to have access to documents, to have prosecution resources, to go after these drug and sex traffickers. They say they need that. The way they get that is through this agreement with ICE. And they say the purpose of this is to, again, go after those drug and sex traffickers, not go after people who are not breaking the law, who are not maybe fully citizens, who are not far along in their naturalization process, etc. They say that immigration enforcement is not really the purpose here, that drug and sex trafficking is. So on that point, what do you and Adelante say?
A couple things. The first thing is that they have been very strong in their message that this ICE MOU, this ICE contract, is the only way to fight human trafficking in Birmingham. And everyone at Adelante, everyone in our coalition, we all agree that human trafficking is a problem that we, the city of Birmingham, should try to address. What we don't agree with is this message that this ICE contract is the only way that it can be done. They want us to think that the FBI in Birmingham can do nothing and is doing nothing to fight human trafficking, and they want us to think that there are no other resources available to Birmingham Police Department outside of contracting with ICE, and that's just not true. Just this year, the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office entered into an agreement with the FBI, so we know that the FBI is working in the Birmingham area. And they are, in this agreement they entered into, was to fight human trafficking. So they are making efforts here. They have resources here outside of ICE. We also know that just last year in 2020, the Department of Justice granted the State Attorney General's office a $2.9 million
It looks here like Rita is a little bit frozen here. Going to give her another second to get her video back going. I know a lot of us are still working from home after I shouldn't say after, but during the COVID pandemic. So we're going to let her try to get her video back up here, get it moving, and get this conversation going, because this is an important conversation. So what I'm going to do, and hopefully Rita can hear me, I'm going to remove her here and hopefully and kind of kick her out right of this broadcast and let her rejoin, and then we can continue this conversation. So while we're waiting on Rita to get back in, I want to give you a little bit of an update as to where we are. I think that we have got Rita back in. I was giving a quick update, Rita. This is the working from home life, right? I was giving people kind of a quick update of where we were. And that is, again, we're talking about this agreement that the city of Birmingham extended with U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, which we're going to call ICE for the purposes of this interview, earlier this month. Now, they extended that agreement, and again, that cross-trained several officers with the powers to essentially operate as cooperating officers with ICE as well as Birmingham police. Now, what you were saying when we had some connectivity issues here, Rita, was that while the city says they need this agreement in order to get access to resources to fight human trafficking, to fight drug trafficking, what you were saying is that your group and that other groups like Adelante believe that that is not the only way to get that mission accomplished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are resources at the FBI. There are state resources, like I mentioned, that $2.9 million grant to fight human trafficking. So it's just not accurate to say that this ICE contract is the only way to do it. So, I mean, that is concerning if that is the message that the city is putting out there, that this is the only way to do it, when it's clearly not. And if there is another reason that they think this is the way to fight human trafficking in Birmingham, the public should know what that is. They might have very good reasons for thinking this is the way to do it, but we don't know. The immigrant community in Birmingham is clearly and reasonably concerned about any further contracts with ICE, and we just want to know why they want this contract to be the way that they fight human trafficking.
So that's a good point. I want to go over a little bit of what has happened in the last 3 years of this agreement. So the city council says again, and you mentioned an MOU earlier, that memorandum of understanding about this agreement. Again, the city says, look, this is not to deport people. We want to continue to urge people, whether they are citizens or whether they are not citizens, to call Birmingham police if they are victims of a crime, if they need to report a crime, etc. We do not want to discourage people from calling police. That's what the city says. They say this is not about deportation. This is not about immigration enforcement, This is about human trafficking and drug trafficking. So in the last 3 years, this is information from the city, they say that there has been $4 million of illegal drugs seized from the streets, and this is all through that agreement. $4 million illegal drugs seized. More than 100 felons have been prosecuted under this agreement, and that 51 people have been freed from human trafficking, including several children. So that is what they say this agreement has yielded in the last 3 years. Because of that, it's reasonable to say that they have similar expectations for an extension of that agreement, to say that more money and illegal drugs will be taken off the streets, more people will be prosecuted for their involvement in drug and sex trafficking, human trafficking, etc., and that more people will be freed. So looking at the record of what has happened during this agreement over the last several years, what is your response to that, and to what, again, the reasonable prediction they would have that this would continue under the agreement?
The agreement that they just signed that was passed this month is probably similar to the agreement that they entered into three years ago. It's not entirely clear because the mayor says this is a different agreement, but that it's continuing the same general project. So again, that's a place to question, like, what is different? What is the same? Why are they being so secretive about what is different in the new agreement? The other thing is that, again, this task force does not need this ICE contract in order to continue fighting human trafficking. What the mayor says, what the city council says, that there are 2 undercover officers who are BPD officers who are this task force. There is other funding sources. There are other resources, both state and federal, that can be used to fight human trafficking. So it's just not correct. It's not the full story to say that this contract is necessary. Um, and I also want to mention that the way that this ICE contract is worded gives ICE and gives these two deputized officers and however many more officers they decide to turn into ICE officers, because they're not limited to two. It gives them much more power, much deeper power, much wider power than what the mayor and the city council are saying they want it to do. They have the power to enforce all federal laws. That is much wider than what the mayor is saying that they're going to do. They might only enforce one or two things, but they can enforce many things. And what these agreements do is that they require information sharing, and they require resource sharing between the city of Birmingham and ICE. And that information sharing, that resource sharing, that deputizing of our police officers and turning them from community police into ICE officers is what causes a chilling effect. That is what makes everyone in Birmingham less safe, because people are less likely to go to the police if they're a victim of a crime, less likely to go to the police if they witness a crime, less likely to talk to the police if the police are trying to solve a crime, if they are a part of an immigrant community or another minority community that is afraid of ICE, or that is afraid of the power that ICE might yield.
So, a couple kind of things I want to jump off of what you just
Mhm.
said. One is that while the city says, and I have a quote here as well from City Council member Hunter Williams, who is on that public safety committee. He says, "Without this task force, we do not have human trafficking enforcement in the city. Birmingham police cannot fight cartel crime. With federal help, we can make a dent." He again listed those numbers I mentioned a minute ago, about 51 people, including children, being freed from human trafficking through this agreement. And he says, quote, "We don't care what your naturalization status is," end quote. And what he's saying is, look, that's not the point of this task force. We're not going out to find people and to say, oh, you're not a citizen, and deport people. That's not the point. That's what the city says. What I'm hearing from you is that your group is saying, look, I get that that's what the city believes is not the point and maybe not the purpose, but the powers are still there in order to make those decisions. Whether or not that is the purpose, it is still a possibility. Is that a fair kind of breakdown?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And
And
that
I would also mention that um, that human trafficking, it's a very complex and very serious problem in our country, um, and it's not simple, and it's not easy to solve. That's why our country is having to use a lot of funds. There are so many task forces. It is a really unseen and underground crime. And victims of human trafficking, for various reasons, for the way that they are trafficked, for the way that they are controlled, they have a lot of barriers to getting help, to escaping, to getting the services that they need, um, and and it is just not as simple as deputizing two Birmingham police officers. If we really want to help victims of human trafficking who are in Birmingham and who are trafficked through Birmingham, there are lots of things that we can do. And shoving this ordinance through the city council is not the best way.
you say that there's a lot of things we can do, that this is not the best way. To play devil's advocate here, I think the city would probably say, well, isn't it better to do this than to do nothing? Is making a dent, is making even two officers able to have access to these resources to be able to get human traffickers and drug traffickers off the street, is that making a dent? Is trying not worth it, even though we're not going to fix the whole problem? And maybe this is not the best way to do it. Does trying not count for something?
Yeah, that's the message I was actually hearing from this city council, is really, like, of like the like frustration of, we have to do something. This is a problem. We have to do something. And I've represented children and adults who are the survivors of human trafficking.
Seems like we might have another internet issue here. I'm going to do the same thing that I did a second ago, and I'm going to remove Rita here, let her rejoin. Seems like the internet cooperates a little bit better with her when she rejoins from this. But essentially, what we have been saying here is that the city believes, look, doing something is better than doing nothing. And what Rita, she was in the process of answering about what she and her group Adelante believe that the city could do better to fight human trafficking, to fight drug trafficking, and to get people off the streets that should be off the streets, but also to free people that need to be. So that was kind of what we were talking about here, Rita. And I know, again, we're all dealing with the working from home internet issues, but I have a question too that I want to ask. I will let you finish kind of your answer of what you were saying about, look, it might not be perfect, but we're trying. So I'll go ahead and let you finish that answer first. Can you hear me? Looks like we are again having some issues here with Rita. Going to remove her again here. We'll try one more time to get her back. But this is an important conversation again for people in Birmingham and really just for people to be aware of this agreement. Now, the city. I want to go back over these numbers. The city council says during this agreement over the last 3 years that $4 million of illegal drugs have been taken off the streets, that more than 100 felons have been prosecuted for these types of crimes, and that 51 people have been freed from human trafficking, including several children. They say the purpose of this agreement is not to deport people. That is not the point. The point is to fight things that the police do not have the resources to do on their own. They say this agreement gives them some of those resources. Again, this includes about 2 Birmingham police officers who are acting and being cross-trained to act as essentially ICE deputized officers. Now, we have talked again about what the city believes here, and the city says, look, this is a good thing. We are trying to make a dent here. Adelante disagrees and says this is not the way to do it. They also say that this is something that could give ICE too much power, that although the point may not be to deport people, Adelante is afraid that that could be the outcome here. Going to give her another second to get back in here. I want to go through some of the comments while we're waiting. I have a comment here from somebody who talks about ICE and their enforcement of these laws. So again, that is kind of what Rita and Adelante's argument is, that the officers would have the power and are deputized to be able to enforce these laws, even though that is not the purpose. The city council has said the purpose is to get drug and human traffickers off the street. Again, going through several of these questions. Somebody says that undocumented immigrants have an especially hard time with human trafficking and that all resources seem appropriate. Anthony, that was exactly what I was going to ask Rita here when we lost her, was saying that often we know that people who are immigrants are unfortunately the victims of some of this trafficking. So what exactly the alternatives here for enforcement would be? If we can get her back on, I will make sure to ask her that as well. Now, we're going to leave some links here in the comments to stories we have explaining this agreement. We have one from our reporter, Greg Garrison, who covered that city council meeting when this was passed earlier this month. I believe that was on December the 8th. He has that story. We're going to leave that here so you can get all of that information. And then we're also going to leave another story here that we had from earlier this year, I should say. I believe it was in November, about this agreement and about some of the fears that Adelante and that some of these other immigrant groups have about the agreement. Does not look like we are getting her back on here. Unfortunately, it looks like there might be a connectivity issue. Again, I think that most of us working from home have probably faced that at some point during the working from home life during the pandemic. So I apologize for that. This is a very important conversation. Hopefully we can get Rita back on another day to explain this a little bit more, explain Adelante's position. Again, you can find all of this information on AL.com. We will leave relevant links here for you for ease for you to click on here. We will make sure to keep you updated on any developments regarding this memorandum of understanding and this agreement as well. Everybody, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for bearing with us again with our technical issues, and we will see you tomorrow.